Guys, we cannot thank you enough for your continual support as we evolve and build this podcast. And in conjunction with our website, we want to thank you by offering a drawing for you guys to enter. So if you go to the website at onemosaic.life, enter your email so that you can be a part of the Circle, our growing group of conscious men and women, where we keep you up to date on the podcast, our events, and other things that could serve your life. When you enter the Circle in the month of May, you'll be entered into a drawing. And at the end of the month, we will draw for the Mosaic Life Vibe box. In that box, 2 books, one handpicked by me, one picked by Trey, a journal for you to track your life, track your thoughts, track your goals, your insights, and some other awesome pieces to set a vibe in your room, in your house, in the place that you worship your life and your highest self, so that you can have the greatest vibe to become the best person that you can be. So go to the website, onemosaic.life, check it out, enter the Circle, and get in for the drawing. Boom. Take care. All right, folks, I'm super excited for you to be tuning in today. This has been just evolving into the most beautiful creation, and the people that we're getting on for us to learn from. I learn from these people, and I'm trying to really dig into their lives, and then for you to distill whatever is necessary for your life from these interviews. It's getting more and more exciting by the conversations that we're having, and I'm bringing the excitement from the actual interview, because we've already recorded this interview that I'm introducing, and there's so much to take from it. Nathan Kohlerman, he is the founder of New Intention, and you can find the link in the information, the podcast notes there. But he's like self-proclaimed psycho-spiritual coach, which is a strange term as you hear it maybe, but the impetus behind that is incredible, because engaging with him, it looks like you're going to him to get better health, physical health, to be more cut, to have stronger muscles. But what you get from engaging with him, it completely breaks apart your concepts of yourself and your world, and helps you to evolve as a person. And he's got so much going on. But his main focus is just showing up in whatever place he's at and transforming the people in that room, or listening to that podcast, or in that Facebook group. And so I invite you to listen to this and take whatever you can from it for yourself, and to also go and engage with him in some way, so that you can glean the insights that he's bringing on his Instagram, in his private Facebook group, in his one-on-one coaching, and just really milk it for whatever you can, because it's a very powerful connection. I'm very excited to bring you this interview, and I can't wait for you guys to listen.
Welcome to the Mosaic Life Podcast.
Life is an art. Every moment a picture painted in time. The color, texture, lighting, all context. The Mosaic Life vision is to cast a warm glow on your masterpiece, highlighting the struggle while showcasing the culmination of years of hard work.
Join us for guided meditations, interviews with authors and leaders, and engaging conversation as we explore the depths of our consciousness.
Welcome, guys, to the Mosaic Life Podcast. We are excited today, Trey and I, to bring you an amazing man. We met him recently through a very great friend of ours, Bree Showman. Nathan Kohlerman, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. It's amazing to be on, guys. I'm really excited for this.
Yeah, likewise. And Trey and I have been just really getting excited about the type of momentum that we're feeling build with this thing that we've created. And it feels really good to have you on the podcast right now, because the places that we're going with this, it feels like a lot of your journey. And I say this from what I've learned from your social media and from the few conversations that I've had. But the places that we're going with this, and the depth that we're taking the conversations, you feel like the perfect person to have on the podcast right now, with the experiences you've had, where it's brought you, and the way you speak about that. Now you just have a really great way of explaining it, and I hope that our listeners really dive into this episode in particular. I already know that it's going to have a lot of potential impact, but before we get too far into it, I'd love if you could just explain a bit about what you're focused on for yourself, and it could be about your business or it could be in your personal life. What's most impactful for you right now, and then we can just kind of go from there.
Beautiful. Yeah. And, kind of touch on both. So, just in my own personal journey, I went through a pretty traumatic injury in March of 2017. And that's what propelled me on the path I am today, in not only resolving my own injuries and my own pains and my own issues and traumas, but, during the rehabilitation process of my hand, being a former bodybuilder, powerlifter, I felt like I lost my identity, my purpose, and my overall functionality as a human being. So, during that rehabilitation process, I was not only rehabbing my hand, but I was rehabbing my mind. During that process, it was probably one of the most challenging times in which, I remember distinctly a time I was brushing my teeth, learning how to use my left hand because I had torn my dominant hand open. And I just dropped the toothbrush and I just collapsed on the ground crying. Like, I just felt absolutely powerless, and being a 253-pound bodybuilder at the time, and being just a massive human being, I just felt so small, so weak. And, I had contemplated ending my life. Like, what good was I as a bodybuilder? What good was I as a powerlifter, as a trainer, as a dad, even not even being able to play on the ground with my kids? And, that's kind of when it hit me. And one of my clients had reached out to me, shortly after that, and invited me into Landmark, which is a, transformational training program. And that was my first introduction into doing the work. And ever since then, about May 2017, I haven't been on my journey long, going on about 3 years on my personal development journey. And I've just dove all in. So, carrying through different experiences with mastering transformational training out of Los Angeles, and digging more into spirituality and going inward, going within, not going into any type of, religious domination or anything, but really just experiencing what it was to be a human and what it was to be in this experience that we call life. And throughout this process, I've discovered my shadows with codependency that stem from abuse and addiction, and all these traumas that I had suppressed throughout my entire life. So, fast forwarding to now, I'm still not even close to being, quote unquote, done with the work. And quite frankly, I don't think I ever will be, nor anyone. I think that's our purpose, is constant evolution, constant ascension, constant elevation of ourselves as individuals. So now, what I'm really finding, especially during these times, is just being with myself and becoming more secure with being still, being more secure with being by myself, and not operating from a place of chasing every single desire and every single addiction and every single craving I might have to reach out when I'm feeling lonely, or to always have to have someone nearby to have that security blanket, because I've always wanted to be nurtured and cared for. And, that's what I'm experiencing now, is really just being alone, with the closures and with the social distancing and everything happening. Like, I am put in a place where I can now experience that. And being single for the first time since I was 14 years old, it's a really challenging experience. I've always had a woman taking care of me. I've always had a partner. I've always had someone doing something for me. And now it's like I'm dating myself. I'm being with myself. I'm rediscovering, and if not only now, just discovering things I like to do by myself. And I'm learning, like, things I like, things I don't like. And now I'm actually, for the first time in my life, being 27 years old, learning how to establish boundaries and knowing when to say no instead of saying yes to every single opportunity that comes through the door. So on the personal side of things, it's a challenging but beautiful process.
That's so important. That's so important. Being able to be comfortable being alone, like you said, especially right now when so many people are dealing with loneliness truly for the first time in so long, and succumbing to those cravings, whether that be food, whether that be drugs, alcohol, or even, porn, anything like that. And knowing how to say no to that because you have higher callings to pursue. I love that. And that's such an important lesson, truly. And I mean, as we dig into this, any piece of wisdom that you can share that has helped you come to that point where you can say, no, I'm not doing this to myself because I know it's not good for me. I'm sure the listeners would love to hear that.
Yeah, I mean, right off the bat, like one of the main focal points is I've always been outwardly seeking physical and sexual validation. I never got super deep into porn. Of course, in my teenage years and while I was in the military, that was definitely a struggle of mine. Now it doesn't really cross my mind to go into that. But, just being, a fit guy with good looks and, a good head on his shoulders with a very conscious outlook on life, I know that I'm an attractive person to other people. So it's not hard for me to just find somebody and immediately indulge in that. And, to have a woman approach me and to me automatically just say, okay, let's go. Right. It's really easy to go there. And I'm now discovering like to not pursue those physical or sexual desires, but really learning how to connect with someone, a woman, and, take the sexuality, the physicality out of it. And I'm just learning how to connect more in general. And one thing that I'm really focusing on is connecting to other men. Like I've always been in a position, and this kind of comes from my childhood, of not being able to trust male figures in my life. And I've always been very resistant to authority, whether that have been, in martial arts with my sensei, very resistant, always challenging something, always defying authority, always wanting to do things my way, and not being open to, other, male guidance on, hey, like this is how I see something, and can you see this as a different perspective as for you as a man? So, now moving into a different realm, and this is a conversation I was having with Ernie, is going and diving into men's coaching, because that is what's been calling me. And I'm finding throughout this process, as I'm starting to distance myself from physical and sexual validation from women, I'm actually starting to seek more intellectual and more emotional connection with men, and really having the vulnerable, authentic, genuine conversations and connections to share that space and to also offer a different perspective and be that space for other men. So coming from, bodybuilding in the military and all these different masks and identities that I used to wear, now I'm able to show up in a different way. And now I can pursue different endeavors. And this is kind of on the business thing that I'm striving for now, going from a personal trainer into a psycho-spiritual transformational coach for men, and being able to bring that foundation of health and wellness and helping and educating and empowering other men to say, these are the tools that I had before, and these will make you a strong man. These will make you feel good. These will make you move good. This will make you a better father, a better business owner, a better brother, a better husband, whatever your mask or your identity or your role that you're currently serving in. But now let's look at a different perspective. Let's look at how your mind is operating. Let's look at things that are possibly holding you back, and let's really dig in and have a vulnerable conversation where you can feel safe with another man, to where now you don't have that feeling of being, emasculated. If you're in a therapy session with a woman, we feel very safe with women, with women being very nurturing mother figures, and we feel very comfortable. But it's like, how often are we doing that with men? Like, did we really have that with our fathers? And if we didn't have that with our fathers, can we start reframing and changing that in a coaching platform and in a different environment to now start healing deeper wounds than we even knew we had? And can we transition that? And can we propel that forward using our personal and professional development with that frame?
Dude, I was in a men's program last year. I talk about it all the time on here, but it was like I gained 10 years of maturity from it. But the point I'm making here is John Wineland, the leader, the facilitator of this program, he would say things like, are you here to have a better relationship to make more money, to heal your relationship with men. And every time he would say, heal your relationship with men, I was like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. It just wasn't me. Like I immediately was like, that's not me. That's ridiculous. My relationship's fine. What I found over the next year, being around 50 to 60 incredibly powerful and wise men, that I had trouble with my relationship with powerful men, and that something was happening within me, a closure that I wasn't aware of. So when you talk about, seeing that, opening it up for yourself, and then giving that to the world in the best way possible, I'm like, hell yes, man. It makes so much sense to be in that spot where you've distanced yourself from things that weren't serving you, and you came to an authentic place of service, and now taking that to other men.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I realized. It's like everything that I've been experiencing in my relationships, and everything that I've even experienced just from a professional place, it's like, why am I always in this comparison mode? Or why am I defying this authority? Or why am I always competing against other men instead of collaboration? When I feel like all I've really sought for is community and culture and connection, going from sports, going from the military, going into bodybuilding and the fitness industry, and now being a solopreneur, it's like, this is the time in the last, almost 3 years now, I've been on my own in this business aspect, where I've realized, like, wow, I can't do everything alone. And some of the most powerful mentors I have in my corner are men. And, I haven't been taking a lot of action, and I trace that back to, again, the relationship behind it, and the healing that is to be done. And for that to happen, to take massive action, I need to have that clarity. And not only that, but if I can do that for myself, there are a lot of other people who need that too,
Yeah. A question comes up personally, and then I think it would also be of service for other people to see this for themselves. But I want to just pose it to you and see what comes up. We can realize that our life is kind of sideways for whatever reason, because we're drawn to certain things, or we're using certain things to cover up, what we're not dealing with. And then we can strip all of that away in a similar fashion to what you've done, with consciously distancing yourself from the validation of women, or, you didn't have a choice. You had to distance yourself for the quarantine. And so a lot of these things are cut out, and you've distilled your essence down to, well, you've distilled yourself down to your essence, and then you move forward with something that's real, that really comes from this inspiration within you. For me, I get to that place sometimes, and then I follow that inspiration, and then there's a moment where it just kind of takes a right turn, or even just like veers off the road a little bit, and it starts to come from that validation place. I wonder if there's a way that you see consciously to bring that to fruition, and to monitor when it goes from spirit, acting from spirit, to acting from an egoic validation type place.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely, is driving from more of a spirit place now, and I think it was an accumulation of several things that just happened back to back. Like my last serious relationship ended back in November, and I'm still, kind of feeling the blunt of that, but now kind of recovering from that. And that's kind of where I consciously saw, like, I need to distance myself from this validation point. Now, again, like with quarantine, it's become more apparent. It's just loudly putting itself in front of me.
Mm.
Is that kind of what you're asking?
Yeah. And I guess, and this might be a process you're working through too, but it's certainly something that I usually don't realize when I've skewed away from coming from spirit. Like I usually come from spirit towards something, and then there's a moment where I tell myself I'm still coming from spirit, but I'm actually coming from ego or in a different place. And for me, a lot of times I don't realize it until I'm face down in the dirt, and I'm like, oh shit, it was back there, a mile ago that I started walking on a different path. And I wonder what, maybe it's practices in your daily life, or maybe it's something, a motto that you have, or a mantra, but ways that you maintain connecting to your spirit in order to be coming from that place that you've, touched on now.
Yeah. Okay. That makes a little more sense. So yeah, I mean,
I get a little wordy, so just just bear with me.
No, you're good. I totally get it. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different practices. One of the most beneficial practices and one of the most beneficial healings I've gone through is gateway healing, and that's a energetic and spiritual healing practice that I've been taught, I've been trained in, and I've gone through. And even more recently, my teacher, Katie, she created this. And during my reading, sat down for about an hour and a half before, and then we go into the 45-minute, breath work with spiritual connection healing session. And then there's a 10 to 15 minute integration period afterwards. But during this reading, she had shared with me that you are doing too much inner work, which was surprising to me because I've always thought that I have to deeply reflect on everything. I have to sit in meditation every day. I have to, journal about my thoughts and my emotions, and I have to find the deeper reason behind everything. And I have to extract it, and I need to pull it apart, and I need to find the root cause of everything. When in reality, it's just like the most beneficial practice I can do for myself is just being gentle with it and just observing it, and then cradling it, because, and this is where like the egoic part of my work came in, where it's like I've developed such a hyper awareness to these things now, to where now if I'm sitting in a meditation, I immediately notice it. I haven't been gentle with myself. I've been like pushing it away and saying, no, that's not right. That's not how I want to be. This isn't how I'm going to show up. This is how I'm going to do it. And it's very my masculine, to where I had to create a structure and a system and a process, which is, how I, started my journey. Of course, like I wanted to remain consistent with my meditation, consistent with my journaling, going to breath work every single week and extracting all of these things, and also incorporating different plant medicines and going deep into my psyche, deep into my subconscious, and having this almost obsession to heal my soul and always trying to fix something.
Mm.
And I've done a lot of different healing modalities, going through whether it be a transformational training seminar, whether it be going into doing breath work, whether it be meditation, take all of those things and wrap it together. And those are just a lot of different modalities. But now looking back, it's saying, and Spirit says to me, like, it's time to just let yourself be and know that like you're fine right now. And going through these healings, it's really interesting to now look at healing as not so much as an inward process, but now just being present. Like that is probably the most powerful process I can, because when I'm being present, my ego doesn't have a chance to step in and say, okay, Nathan, you have the awareness. So let's make sure that you stay and veer away from every single possibility of you falling back into those old patterns. But if you do those old patterns, now you're not on your journey. Now you're not healing. Now you're just going against yourself. Now you're a hypocrite, right? Wow. So it's been really interesting to see these practices kind of unfold to now having this, hyper awareness and this conscious awareness that everybody talks about, but knowing that this conscious awareness is actually just giving my ego an opportunity to step in even more. So now the main practice I have is just being fully present and just being 100% completely gentle with anything that shows up, and just being more accepting of just who I am and how I am. Like I was on this relentless journey to change things about myself and to transform, when in reality that's just not me in a way, and I have this hyper awareness, so I can choose to show up in certain ways. But when these things happen, I'm not aggressive towards myself, and that's just a recent discovery. And this is now a practice I plan on implementing, is just taking action with clarity in the present moment and not forcing myself to have to sit in meditation every day, because I'm such an inward person where even while I'm working with a client and I'm right there with them, like that's a meditation of its own. But I had to like completely rewire and restructure my definition of what being mindful was, or what being in the practice was.
How long? Yeah. So we've had various conversations with different folks. Scott comes to mind. We talked about spiritual awakenings and how they can be sudden, but it sounds like here in your case, and very similar to my case, it was very gradual. I mean, over what period of time did you realize that you were capable of this introspection and able to tame your ego in a sense that it was not harmful to you anymore? I mean, for me, it was a multi-year process. And you said that you're 27, still in your 20s, which is amazing because I was an idiot in my 20s and I didn't come to being myself until my early 30s. But what, I guess, how long was that road for you? Obviously, we're still on it. But, when did you realize, okay, this is the place where I know I'm on the right track?
Yeah, I mean, it was actually, and I thankfully had a very sudden realization, going through that landmark training program. I remember, they had us, talk to one person or write someone a letter in our past who, we had all these stories made up about. It was the first time I heard this language of a story, a racket, self-limiting belief, and how we show up, the language in which, transformation, I feel as a community we speak that language. And it's the first time I had started hearing words like that. And looking at that, like the first time I had created that story about my father and, how I blamed myself for the divorce because I wasn't strong enough and I couldn't, handle the things that were being done to me. It was the first time I actually saw my dad cry. It was when I told him that, like, I blame myself for everything, which is why I started acting out, why I started getting involved with the wrong crowds, why I started indulging in drugs, and which eventually led to my heroin addiction. And, being addicted to heroin at 16, 17 years old, I didn't realize how much I was really packing and shoving down, but it all came out in those trainings. And I just started really understanding the language I spoke to myself in and the ways that I was showing up. And, over this period, it's just been gradual, but that first sign, that first time that I actually was aware to the bullshit that I've been telling myself, it just clicked. Yeah. And it then became like a relentless pursuit to trace back everything, because I had in that moment realized everything I've really lived was a lie. And I did that to myself. So it's just, again, this gradual process that I've had. And it's been interesting to also see, like, how you do anything is how you do everything. Like, that's the motto, that's the mantra. Because how I was showing up and the things I was saying to myself, it directly correlated. But the way I had that awareness and the realization and the way I was able to implement it started following me. And I've always had a gift for learning something and being able to immediately apply that information and integrate it, which is why, using plant medicines has always been, for the very limited little experience I have, I've had some tremendous breakthroughs because I immediately started realizing that I could see something and I can just put it into words, and I can then therefore integrate it into almost every setting. So it's like, I didn't realize I had that introspective ability until I was introduced to the language. But once I had a language and a framework to work from, I was able to apply it to anything and everything I did.
That's amazing.
Man. Yeah. So I'm just like in awe of the story of this 16-year-old heroin addict and where that brought you to now. Like, you are super young, 27, and having the type of, success in the world that you have, and then the success that you have internally is just incredible to see a person, in their 20s at that point. And then it makes sense as I hear you talking about, being 16 years old in this dark place that, for lack of a better word, that it like expedited that spiritual journey, because it's like you either bring yourself to your own death or you find your way out of it. And your teenage years and early 20s, man, those are formative years. So it's just there's so much of the story that we may not hear in this podcast, but it's like, wow, there's a lot of, breadth there in your experience. And it's clear that it's brought you to this point in your life. I'm curious to bring that forward to primal movement. I know that might be a jump, but for some reason I feel like, one, because you're an expert in this field now, and I'm curious as to where this came into your life, and if it had an impact on your processing of these things as they come up, and if there's a link, what would that be?
Yeah, and then thank you first and foremost. But yeah, I mean, I discovered the primal movement, and we look at primal movement from two different angles, or I should say I look at primal movement from two different angles. And the primal movement of how we learn to develop and move as children from birth. During my rehabilitation process after my hand, March 2017, I tore my hand open, 4 flexor tendons, radial artery, median nerve repair. 3 months of rehab after that from passive range, got a hemolysis, got the scar tissue removed, got another 12 weeks of rehab, and then another month of hand specialization therapy. And they didn't ever really get me back to full function. And so fast forward into that time, and around August or September of 2017, I was introduced by one of my clients to a chiropractor who specifically used a technique called dynamic neuromuscular stabilization, DNS. For if you've seen some of my posts and looking back at some of my content with clients, you'll see that I use DNS as one of the main frameworks for how I help graduate people from the rehabilitation phase back into fitness. And essentially, DNS is the combination of the sciences of neurology, orthopedics, chiropractics, and pediatrics, but it uses the platform of developmental kinesiology on how we learn to develop and move as children, and we use babies in certain positions of the life cycle in the motor control model on how we learn to develop and move. Starting on the belly and then working our way to our side and rolling, and then coming up into more of a prone position, and then we go into our 6 months supine, which is also known as happy baby, which is what we see in yoga. And we use these positions every single day, and that, in my mind, redefined my language of functional movement, because a lot of the times in training, you'll walk in day one and you'll immediately start squatting, but we don't actually learn how to start squatting until we're 12 months old. So we just skipped and bypassed 9 months of developmental movements. And it made me look at traditional training, and I said, well, if we can't squat, like, why are we loading a bar back? Like, why was I doing that throughout my entire bodybuilding time? So being introduced to this model, I started understanding exactly how we learn to develop and move as children. And that is the primal, primitive movement of a human being. And shortly after that, going through that course, I learned how important it was for the neurology and the stability of our body. I should say the neurology influenced the stability of our body. And that's kind of when I got introduced to the importance of breath and respiration and stabilization, and the influence that if we can't move, a lot of the times it may not be a mobility issue or a flexibility issue. Sometimes it's a stability issue. Most of the time it's a stability issue, where if we can resolve the central issue with the brain and spinal cord, if we can resolve the central issue in the trunk, in the intrinsic core, which is our main function of that, is the breathing aspect of our body. If we can retrain our breathing, if we can retrain our stability, then we can start retraining our movement and our patterns, and we can learn to almost, quote unquote, rewire those patterns. So I went through that, and that was on the, the primal development of a human. But then shortly after that, I discovered animal flow, and I've gone through the level 1, level 2 advanced flow design now. And that practice just spoke to me, and me coming from martial arts at the age of 5 and stopping that practice until the age of about 16, and being, a former wrestler in high school, this just spoke to me. And it was the first practice that I found that I started realizing that it started really helping me with my hand. The planche positions, that we commonly see in gymnastics with the shoulders over our fingertips. I started getting the wrist extension back in my hand, I started feeling that I could stretch my hand in different ways, and that I could start loading my body, and I could start strengthening everything that I had lost. And, we don't have a camera or a visual, but if you can imagine your first two fingers and curling into a full fist, I only had about half of that, to where my fingers stuck about perpendicular right out of my hand. And over time, I started realizing, by applying DNS and applying more animal flow, and even incorporating different types of training like kettlebell and steel mace training, which required a tremendous amount of grip strength, I started realizing that using these unconventional methods, I started getting my hand back, and I started becoming stronger. And the more I practiced, it was like a martial art to me. And I started practicing, and eventually, and I wouldn't say I'm a master at it, but I'm highly proficient, and I do it almost daily. And that is where I started applying the principles of my movement-based meditations. And just being somebody who came from someone who wasn't able to express themselves in school, being bullied, and not being able to express myself in a home with chaos, and not really understanding how to express myself in an emotionally intelligent way to women and within relationships, I started learning how to express myself through movement. And I developed, and I should say I developed this, I just started applying this principle into my own practice, where your tempo reflects your tenacity. And with animal flow, we have certain movements that break the cycle. We look at energy rolls, where we have continuous movement in one direction, and we're directing energy in one direction. We have breaks, where the energy stops, and that's normally when we add a form-specific stretch. And that's where we use a slower tempo to catch our breath, to give our body a little break. And then after that, we can either continue our energy roll in one direction, or we can redirect it to another path. So we have freedom of movement using different types of energy directions, right? And I started noticing that messing with this tempo, I started actually, if I was in an enhanced elevated state, which means if I was anxious, if I was nervous, if I was angry, if I was upset, I would move at a much faster pace. But I noticed that when I was calm, when I was relaxed, when I was reserved, when I was sad even, I would move a lot slower. And I started noticing, after practicing this daily for now almost 2 years, that I can actually start shifting my emotional expression with my movement expression. So now, if I'm in a movement session, if I'm in an animal flow session with myself, if I'm really, really amped up, if I'm anxious, if I'm nervous, if I'm really on edge, I will intentionally move slowly through everything. And after my flow, I'll realize, wow, I can now shift my emotional vibration with my movement. And that's, just the principle I've applied, where the tempo reflects the tenacity, and finding primal movement and how we learn to develop as humans, and applying that to retrain my stability patterns, and incorporating animal flow and other techniques such as FRC, functional range conditioning, to optimize my joint function. I now had a good balance of mobility, stability, strength, and flow, in which now I could apply these principles and essentially teach others how to do that as well, and teach them how to get out of their head and into their body, and by using their body as a gateway to start shifting the way they think and the way they feel.
Man, I love that. The tempo reflects the tenacity. Is that right?
The tempo, like
tempo,
your speed, the tempo, right?
Okay. Yeah. And I want to keynote this for people too that might be listening who maybe don't know animal flow, or maybe they know it and they feel like they can't do it. But what you said there about adjusting your tempo, your pace, and how changing your physiology can affect your emotional state, how you can do that. You can activate that resource no matter what you're doing, whether you're washing dishes, right? And you find yourself throwing them over into the other sink. You're like, oh man, I'm moving really fast, and just slowing down and deliberately wiping each dish and then moving it and setting it gently in the next thing. That's a very important point for people, and you can use it in your voice as you're speaking and slowing down, and how that affects your body and your emotional state. It seems like an invaluable piece of information.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I remember even the time my sister said that, like, she saw washing dishes as her meditation, and I watched her one day and I was like, wow, that really makes sense. And you can, again, like, that's why I say it's just a principle, because you take a principle and you apply it to any type of, exercise or activity or anything that you're doing, and use it with whatever tool you want. And it's boundless.
It is. It certainly is. I mean, I can't tell you how that's running for me. I'll go out and on a 5-10 mile run, and that time spent just myself in the road or the path, that is truly meditative to me, even more so sometimes than sitting in breath for 20 minutes. And you're absolutely right. I mean, that is such a therapy for at least myself, and helping to relieve anxiety or stress or anger, any of those negative emotions.
100%. And I mean, just like coming from a place where doctors told me that I had severe anxiety and depression and post-traumatic stress and all these things, whether it be in a therapeutic or a clinical setting, I've kind of realized that, again, during this practice, like, those are just symptoms, and I don't need to constantly treat a symptom all the time. The symptoms are just signals, and we can move those signals in whatever way we choose. And, the fact that you can do that with running is amazing. I really do commend anybody who will run and find a meditative state, because that is one of the most uncomfortable things in the world to me. But again, like, get comfortable being uncomfortable. And
Exactly.
That's the definition of growth,
Absolutely.
So, kudos to you, man. Kudos to you.
It's running and cold showers. Those are the two things that I'm comfortable being uncomfortable in. I did want to, I don't know, one thing that comes to mind in a point of what you said, I realized my own personal growth when I stopped blaming others for my problems. And I realized that the onus was on me for my own happiness. Those two epiphanies, and I will call them that because that's what they were such a life-changing force that I was able to propel myself, further than I had in, the 12, 13 years of my adult life. And it sounds like that may be the case for you, but it happened a lot sooner. I don't know if you can delve into that a little bit more. I know, when you're 16, 17, you're addicted to heroin. Were you, what was the driving factor there? Were you blaming others for issues you had in your life? Was it all internal? I'm curious about that.
I was just angry. I was just really, really angry. And a lot of it was just subconscious. Like, I wasn't consciously blaming anybody. I wasn't consciously blaming myself. It's actually interesting that, looking back, like, I didn't even get addicted to heroin by saying, oh, I'm going to go do heroin today. Like, I remember distinctly, being in this room and two guys telling me that, oh, this is BT. And I didn't even know what BT was. I was just in that frame of mind, around the people who I was around and the things that I was doing. Like, I was fighting a lot, going out to the streets, starting random fights, getting, jumped into these crews or whatever you want to call them. And essentially just fighting for fun, like, because I just enjoyed it and I was just angry. And that's the only thing that brought me any type of relief, was fighting. And, going down the drug path, and, it certainly wasn't just heroin. I was going into, like, marijuana, cocaine, ketamine, ecstasy, you name it. I was pretty much just trying to do it. Because subconsciously I didn't have to be myself. I didn't have to feel anything at all. So, when they said, hey, like, here's PT, I was like, okay, well, I'll try it. And the minute it went into my body and I felt nothing, it was game over. Like I was there. I was addicted. So it wasn't even the fact that I was like projecting anything out to anybody else or blaming anybody. It's just, I just didn't want to feel anything at all.
You know, something that you bring up there about your community, the people around you, and you were just around people. Maybe you idolized them because they were funny, or maybe you just were connected to them because they lived down the street, and it just put you in this position where you found that to be the next phase of your life. What were some of the first few communities that you got into that brought a different feeling for life, maybe gave you hope or helped you see a different side of you that would then lead to the work that you're doing today?
Yeah. I mean, just from earlier on, I've dipped my hand in a lot of different communities growing up. So I think the first real feeling of community I had was like when I had like my first set of friends going into my freshman year. Like I didn't have a lot of friends growing up. I was the smallest kid in class. I was a little nerd. I was bullied. I was picked on. Not any type of like shoved in a garbage can type of stuff, but I was just a weird, quirky kid, and I creeped people out. Like they didn't want to be around me.
I'm with you, brother.
Yeah. So, once I went to high school, I had like my first set of friends. I was like weightlifting over the summer. I ended up going onto the football team, the wrestling team, and got a complete, quote unquote makeover. Got rid of my glasses, got contacts, got rid of my braces, cut my hair, and all of a sudden I was attractive to people for the first time, and that felt good. So, and that's kind of like where my thing with women comes in, right? I was the athlete, I was popular, and I shouldn't say popular, but I was accepted for the first time. I was attractive for the first time in my life, so I thought. And then I had the experience with sports teams, and that's kind of when I realized like I am completely defined of authority. And then once I started, getting in fights and getting kicked out of schools, the 4 different high schools. And I distinctly remember, I think it was my second school, I met this group of people and, they're in a quote unquote crew, and, they saw how I could fight. So, being a little mini, gang, if you want to call it, they were a little bit older, some of us in high school, some of them out of high school, which should have spoke to me and gave me an implication of what was going on. And, that's kind of where I felt like, wow, these people actually accept me. And it was the first time I actually felt like accepted, not knowing, of course, there was an ulterior motive for my uses. And kind of fast forwarding through that and going through the drug scene, then I found the military, ended up getting sober, going to the military, and I had a family. And that was the first time in which I really kind of was introduced to the, one team, one dream mentality, the team mentality. Like if one falls, we all fall. And that hit home for me. So that was my true sense of belonging. And that's probably the closest thing I've had in terms of community in a while, until I started building my own now, which I'll get to. And, once I was medically discharged in 2016, I got into the bodybuilding and fitness community pretty heavily. And I realized it was very competitive. Even though I had people around me, it's kind of like always this comparison, like, oh, well, do I look better? Or does he look better? Or am I bigger? Or is he stronger? And, if I go on stage with him, am I going to win or is he going to win? And, it shifted from a one team, one dream to a one-man show real quick. And I became very selfish, very self-indulgent in myself. And after my injury and after, discovering things now, the communities that I'm in are very, rehabilitation focused, very health focused, very, longevity based focused people. And I'm thankful for that. And, diving a little bit deeper, getting more into yoga and going into breath work and going to, the cold plunge, and I'm sure as all of us probably know, once you start discovering those things like breath work and cold plunge and cacao ceremonies, it's a whole different group of people. It's kind of across the board. You can say we're woo woo or whatever you want to say, or spiritual is what people call them, the spiritual community, which again, I don't really agree with that term. But I think that, being a part of more mindful communities has brought me to where I am now, to now wanting to create community around me to really enhance our conscious efforts of living a more optimized life through our mind, through our body, and through our soul, which is kind of an accumulation and a collaboration of a lot of the communities that I found after my injury up until this point.
Yeah, and you've created a community actively on Facebook as well. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and how you're serving?
Yeah, so I had started this community on Facebook. It's called Activate Intention, primarily because my brand is called New Intention, NEU, short for neurology and intention. Everything starting from the mind and being intentional with your body, with your mind, with your spirit, in your practice. And so I created this group, Activate Intention, and I started this last year, and I was running, a fall challenge, and I was going to do a New Year challenge. And I kind of saw it as a different way to kind of collectively bring all my clients into one place and start running challenges and doing things like that. Until I realized that I had no idea what the hell I was doing. And I got kind of frustrated with it and gave up quite quickly. So I had maybe less than 30 people in that group. And of course, I wasn't consistent and I had my hands in a lot of other places. But once this pandemic hit, it called to me and I said, okay, well, if we're going to be out of a gym, if, we're going to be social distancing, how can we stay connected? And, seeing, very good friends and mentors of mine, one being, Matt Gottesman, the other one being Will Armijo. These two men, have been mentoring me over the last year, and they've constructed and built massive communities around them in business and in nutrition. So, using what they've taught me, I started this group up when the pandemic happened, about 6 weeks ago. I think I fully built it maybe about 4 weeks ago. And, now there's a little over 300 members we have in the group. And I'm putting some content in there, things I'm not putting on Instagram or Facebook, but I'm overall just trying to have more conversations and connections and discussions. But I'm also offering, free and donation-based virtual classes and hosting them inside of this community where people can, show up on Mobility Mondays and they can have a workout of the day or a WOD Wednesday, and they can have a Friday flow in which now I can bring, people who have been following my work, and bring them in and just trying to offer value. So inside of that group, I'm doing, free and donation-based virtual classes, free and donation-based, of course, for the time being until, things go back to normal. And then, I'll probably have a small fee, if that. I might not even do that. I haven't even made up my mind. It kind of depends on how everything goes. But I just wanted to create this community to keep people connected and to provide value first and foremost, and to give them different tools and resources and a place to come where they could find everything, whether it be, access to me and my mind and some of my philosophies and my thoughts in which they could, relate to, and, or whether it's to classes to optimize their body. And more recently, I started a mentorship platform in there, and I'm actually working with two men in the group now on their personal and professional development, which is something I didn't even really see as an opportunity until I just put it out there. So I also do conscious coaches corner interviews. So I bring in different coaches who I know, whether it be through mental health performance coaches, whether it be a swing coach, and whether it be another movement coach, a nutrition practitioner, a doctor, everyone who works with someone, in my opinion, is a coach. And if they know me, chances are they do have a conscious head on their shoulder where I want to bring them in, and I want to bring them into my community. I want my community to also know who else is out there, in giving people who I truly believe in, a chance to come in and explain, who they are, what they do. And then for us, just like we're doing right now, just have a conscious conversation about, different topics at hand or different things that they want to talk about or that we're passionate about. And instead of just, having these, discussions when it's just me and them, like, why not record it, bring it in, and just provide, again, maximum amounts of value and awareness and impact. And then also in this community, we do connection calls every Sunday at 6. And these are probably one of the most impactful things about the group, because, just the conversations I've had with the group over the last 3 to 4 weeks, it is in a very safe and intimate setting. And, we're getting very vulnerable. We're talking about the things that are really on our mind. We're expressing how we feel. We're connecting with each other and telling each other what we're struggling with, and, what things we can start doing to move the needle forward in our life. So I select a topic every week. I open it with breath work. I have everybody open up and tell me how they're feeling, and, we pick a topic and then we dive deep. And if people need additional support on the call, then we as a collective conscious community and people on the call can be there as a soundboard and be there as a safe space for them to feel, again, safe to express themselves and not having to hold everything in and pin everything in, because it's very easy right now when we don't have a lot of access to social resources, nor, in general, even if we weren't social distancing, a lot of people don't feel like they have a safe place. So if I can host and facilitate that for people, then, that's why I built the community, is for people to come and have a safe place, and for people to come and have a one-stop shop, and to redefine human optimization through mind, body, and soul, which has been my tagline since day one, but didn't even realize that the effect or the impact that could have until now.
Nathan, where does somebody start? Let's think back 10 years ago in your life where you find yourself at rock bottom. If somebody's listening to this and they feel like they're hitting that bottom, where do they start? There's so many avenues to go down, and finding that motivation to pick a road and pursue it. What resources do they have to really get that help they need to find that transformation?
Yeah, I think the first step is finding a safe space and finding someone to hold that safe space, whether that be a coach, whether that be a therapist, whether that be anyone, whatever somebody feels safe doing. Like, I don't think there's just one way or where somebody can go, but that first phase, we even look at, my addiction recovery. When I hit rock bottom, I had to first accept and acknowledge the fact that I had a problem and I want to fix it. And now that I know that, like, what is the best place for me to go? Who do I know? Who do I have in my corner? Who do I trust? And finding someone who you can trust, finding someone who you feel safe with to express yourself in a vulnerable setting, and removing the fear of being vulnerable itself. I think that's the first place to start.
Boom. Yeah, man. Once a person it gets the space to feel their depth and they're learning to express it freely. For me and for a lot of people that I've seen on this type of path, that's like the way to catch momentum, right? Like when we start to open up, we get to see ourselves, how powerful we are and what's possible. And when we have somebody in our life that can hold that for us, it makes it that much easier. Yeah. Yeah,
100%. Because it's like even just now reflecting on everything in the last 10 years for me, it's like there's so much stuff. And we live in an age of information, and there's so much out there that, things can become easily watered down or convoluted or misdirected or misguided or misinformed. Whereas, if you find that one safe space and that one safe person, like, I look back now and I'm saying, well, it's not like I knew any of those things existed. I just went with one thing and I went all in on it. And I really dedicated myself to that practice, to that healing, to that journey. And just one thing led to another, to another, to another. And these doors just started opening. It's not like I planned on, 3 years ago going and, right after my hand injury being like, oh, I'm going to do animal flow. No, I found this, which led to that, which then led to this, which led to that. And it was just a sequence of events that the universe just unfolded for me. But once you take that first step and just creating that momentum, once you start filling yourself with that energy, and once you start moving your vibration and frequency in that direction, everything just starts falling into place. It's just that first step.
That's incredibly powerful. It really is. And, for anybody who's listening and they feel like they don't know which direction to go, take that step, do something, move forward, and then find the next one from there. That's amazing. Nathan, I want to be respectful of your time. It's hard to believe we've been talking for an hour already. Ernie, do you have any other questions before we kind of bring things to a close?
No, man, you can take us home. Nathan is the real deal. So if anyone is listening to this and no matter what avenue you're looking to sort out your life or make change or progress in some way, being in contact with this man can have a strong impact on that, whether it's on his Instagram or on Facebook or some of the other ways that he might mention here. But yeah, Trey, take us home. Thank you, Nathan.
Yeah, absolutely. And, on top of that, everything that we talked about, the best ways to contact Nathan, those will be listed in the show notes as well as on our brand new website. But Nathan, one thing I do like to ask all of our guests before letting them go. I consider myself a book nerd, and so I always like to hear, what is the single most life-changing book you've ever read?
Attached
Is
by far, just through my own journey of addiction, codependency, all these things that kind of go hand in hand with one another. It single-handedly put me into a place and gave me an understanding of, why am I anxious? And it's okay to be anxious, or it's okay to be avoidant. And, within relationships, everything's a relationship. Every person in your life is a relationship. But if I'm feeling these ways, there are healthier, more secure ways to go about them. And it just changed the entire framework and the language I have with everyone in my life.
And who's that by?
I can't remember off the top of my head who the exact author is.
That's all right. We'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, that's amazing. I am absolutely going to check that out. But Nathan, before we let you go, what is the best way for people to find out more about you, connect with you, shout out at you, whatever your preference is?
Yeah. So first and foremost, thank you, Ernie and Trey, for having me on the Mosaic Life podcast. It was an absolute honor and privilege. And I'm so happy I was able to share as much value as I possibly could at this time. So thank you both. And, people can find me at my website. It's www.neu.com. And then they can find me across all platforms at Nathan Kohlerman, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. It's pretty much all the same thing there.
Awesome. And if they want to join your Facebook group, they just connect with you on Facebook. Is that the best way to do that?
Yeah. Or they can just search Activate Intention and they just request to join, and they can be inside the community.
Awesome. Nathan, seriously, thank you so much. This was eye-opening for me. It bred a lot of motivation within me. So I'm looking forward to going back, listening to this and taking a lot of it into practice. So from a personal standpoint, thank you so much. And from our listeners, I can't wait to share it. So thank you again.
Of course. Thank you so much, Trey. I appreciate you both. Ernie, especially thank you for the introduction and bringing me on the show and introducing me to Trey. I'm excited to see where else this may lead us.
Yeah, me too, man.
Awesome, guys. Thank you again, and take care. Huge thank you again to Nathan Kohlerman for joining us for this podcast. What an incredible conversation that was. If you want to learn more about Nathan, check your show notes or go to onemosaic.life and find him in the interview section. And while you're scrambling around the interwebs, I would highly encourage you, check out his Activate Intention Facebook group. It is a highly engaging community with great content. Also, while you're at the onemosaic.life podcast website, join the circle. What is the circle, you may ask? Well, it is our Be in the Know email list. And if you sign up during the month of May, you will be entered to win our very first Vibe Box. And what that is, Ernie is going to handpick a book that has changed his life. I am going to handpick a book that has changed my life. You're also going to get a brand new journal for your use and some other goodies as well. You can only do that at onemosaic.life. Enter your email and you will be entered to win. Last but not least, if you're on Instagram, I know you are, follow us at One Mosaic Life. And if you are an Apple Podcast user, leaving us a 5-star review will go a long way in helping others find out about us. And it's something that we truly appreciate. So again, thank you very much for listening. Thank you, Nathan, for being on the podcast. We will be back with you soon. Be well and take care.